I always thought betrayal would come with warning signs, late nights at the office, sudden interest in fitness, a new perfume scent that wasn't hers. Turns out, infidelity doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it seeps into your life so quietly that by the time you notice, the rot is already spread. And by then, you're left staring at the wreckage of a life you thought was real. For me, it wasn't a lipstick stain on a collar or a hushed phone call in the dead of night. It was something much simpler. A shift. An imperceptible but undeniable change in the way my wife looked at me. Less warmth. More distance. As if she had already left but forgot to pack her bags. I don't lose my temper. I don't make accusations without proof. I observe. I analyze. And that's exactly what I did when my gut told me something was wrong. I started small. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted certainty. The kind of certainty that doesn't leave room for denial or excuses. The kind that can't be twisted into misunderstanding. So, I started watching. Not just her, everything. Her patterns. Her words. The way she responded to my touch. The way she suddenly seemed more protective of her phone, a device that had never been off limits before. Then, the first breadcrumb appeared. A text message too quickly deleted. But the reflection in the window behind her betrayed the sender's name. D. A single initial, but a world of meaning. Most men might have confronted her then and there. Shouted. Demanded answers. But I've always believed that the best revenge isn't delivered in a moment of anger. It's planned. Precise. Unavoidable. So, I played dumb. I smiled. I kissed her goodnight. I even told her I loved her, because at that moment, my love hadn't yet turned to ice. But the next day, I started digging. It didn't take long. People think they're discreet, but patterns don't lie. Bank statements. Locations. The way her phone was suddenly dying more often, yet her screen time was increasing. And then, the confirmation. A simple tracker app, disguised as something innocent, showed me exactly what I needed to see. Hotel. 3:42 p.m. Same location, twice a week. I remember looking at the screen, seeing the blinking red dot that represented my wife, and feeling nothing. No rage. No heartbreak. Just a quiet, eerie calm. Because in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. 1. My wife was cheating. 2. She had no idea what was coming. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to let her paint me as the bitter husband who just couldn't make her happy. No. If she wanted to destroy our family, I was going to make sure she felt every last consequence of that choice. I thought about our children. About the years I had spent building a home, thinking I was crafting a future for us, only to realize that while I was holding up the walls, she was tearing out the foundation. But the thing about foundations is when they crack, everything collapses. And I was going to let her feel the weight of that collapse. I started my plan that very night. Silent. Calculated. The way a man does when he knows he's playing the long game. I wasn't just going to leave. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to make sure that by the time I was done, she wasn't just alone, she was forgotten. She wanted secrecy. I was going to give her exposure. She wanted passion. I was going to give her emptiness. She wanted freedom. I was going to make sure it was the loneliest thing she ever felt. Because some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve consequences. And I was about to deliver them. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I had a good life. Not perfect, because perfection is a lie we tell ourselves, but good. Stable. Predictable in the best way possible. The kind of life a man builds when he believes in hard work, loyalty, and the quiet comfort of routine. My mornings always started the same way. The alarm at 6:30 a.m. The weight of my wife's body curled against mine, her warmth seeping into my skin. I would wake up first, always. Let her sleep a little longer while I made my way downstairs to start the coffee. The smell of fresh brewed espresso filling the kitchen, a familiar scent that signaled the beginning of another ordinary day. By 7 o'clock, I'd be back upstairs, placing her cup on the nightstand before nudging her awake with a kiss on the forehead. She always made this little noise, half protest, half pleasure, before finally stretching and murmuring a soft, good morning. It was the kind of thing I had taken for granted. That slow, sleepy intimacy. Breakfast was always quick. She liked Greek yogurt with honey. I preferred eggs and toast. We'd sit at the kitchen table, scrolling through our phones, trading occasional remarks about the news or our plans for the day. Simple. Easy. The kind of routine that makes you feel safe. I left for work at 8 o'clock sharp. I managed a successful logistics company, a business I had built from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and it gave us a life most people would envy. A beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. A paid-off car in the driveway. Vacations to Italy, Japan, the Maldives, each trip carefully documented in the photo albums she loved to curate. If you had looked at us from the outside, you would have seen a happy marriage. The kind people post about on anniversaries, captioning photos with phrases like "my rock" and "forever and always." And in a way, I believed it too. But in hindsight, the cracks were already forming. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. She used to text me little things during the day, memes, inside jokes, a random thinking about you. Those messages became less frequent. Then they stopped altogether. At the time, I told myself it was just life. People get comfortable. They settle into routines. She used to wait for me to come home before eating dinner. Then, one day, she didn't. Just a casual, I wasn't that hungry, so I ate earlier. The first time, I brushed it off. The second time, I felt something tighten in my chest. She used to curl into me on the couch while we watched TV. Now, she sat on the opposite end, scrolling through her phone with that faint, distracted smile. The kind that wasn't for me. And then there were the excuses. Work's been crazy. I'm just tired. I need a little space. Space. That word had never been a part of our marriage before. But I let it slide. Because that's what love does, doesn't it? It trusts. It rationalizes. It makes excuses where none should exist. Looking back, I see it all so clearly. The subtle detachment. The shifts in routine. The way her laughter came just a little too easily when she was on her phone. But when I asked what was funny, she'd just shrug and say, "Nothing." Nothing. Nothing was the word she used when she started coming home later. Nothing was what she said when she suddenly cared more about her appearance, when she changed perfumes, when she started locking her phone at night. Nothing was the lie I swallowed over and over, even as my instinct screamed at me. Because the truth was too ugly to admit. Because I wanted to believe that the life I had built wasn't a lie. But reality doesn't care about what you want. It only cares about what is. And soon, I would learn exactly what my wife's nothing really meant. It started with something small, almost insignificant. The kind of thing most men would shrug off, tell themselves they were imagining it, that it was nothing. But I don't believe in coincidences. And I sure as hell don't ignore instincts. It was a Wednesday evening. Nothing special. I came home at my usual time, 6:30 p.m. The house smelled like citrus and lavender, the faint trace of a candle she must have lit earlier. She was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, her back to me. For a moment, it felt normal, the way it used to be. Then I saw it. Her phone, face down on the counter, screen still lit up from a notification she had just cleared. That alone wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was the way her shoulders stiffened the moment she heard me walk in. Just for a second. A brief, almost imperceptible pause before she turned around with a smile, too bright, too practiced. "Hey, you're home early." I wasn't. I was right on time. A lesser man might have brushed it off. A lesser man might have believed her. Instead, I smiled back, kissed her on the cheek, and reached for a glass in the cabinet. "What were you up to?" "Just catching up on some work," she said, a little too quickly. Then, as if realizing how clipped her response was, she added, "Had a long day. Figured I'd start dinner early." She was always good at that, covering her tracks before they were even questioned. But here's the thing. She never started dinner early. Not once in our marriage. She liked to unwind when she got home, change into comfortable clothes, watch an episode of whatever show she was binging before even thinking about dinner. It was a routine as predictable as the sun setting. So why now? I glanced at her phone, still face down on the counter. She had cleared the notification before I even saw it, which meant she didn't want me to. That was the first red flag. The second came 5 minutes later. I walked to the fridge to grab a beer. When I turned around, she was holding her phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen before locking it and setting it back down. Not in her usual spot. This time, she placed it in her purse. That was new. She had never been protective of her phone before. We never had the kind of relationship where we snooped through each other's messages, because we never had to. It wasn't about trust. It was about knowing. Knowing that there was nothing to hide. Except now, she was hiding something. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I just observed. Because the best way to catch a liar isn't by confronting them. It's by letting them dig their own grave, one little slip-up at a time. Dinner was uneventful. She talked about work, about how her boss was getting on her nerves again, about a new restaurant she wanted to try that weekend. Normal things. But her energy was off. Forced. like she was playing a role instead of just being herself. Then, another detail. Halfway through dinner, she checked her phone. A quick glance, so fast she probably thought I wouldn't notice. And when she saw whatever was on the screen, her entire demeanor changed. It was the smallest thing, a flicker of hesitation before she forced another smile and took a sip of wine. But I saw it. I didn't ask. I didn't press. I just filed it away. Later that night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every little inconsistency. 1 moment can be a mistake. 2 can be coincidence. But 3? 3 is a pattern. And patterns don't lie. People do. She wasn't just distracted. She wasn't just stressed. Something was wrong. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. People think betrayal is a sudden thing, like a knife to the back. One clean cut. But that's not how it works. Betrayal is slow. It's a series of small, deliberate choices that build up over time. Lies told in pieces. Trust chipped away bit by bit. And my wife? She thought she was careful. Thought she was smart. But she underestimated me. After that night, I stopped second-guessing. I stopped telling myself I was imagining things. Because I wasn't. Something was happening, and I was going to find out exactly what. So, I did what any man with a brain does. I started watching. The next morning, I noticed the first major change. Her phone, which had always been left on the nightstand while she got ready, was now with her every second. She took it into the bathroom while she showered. She kept it in her pocket while making coffee. It was always locked, always face down. Before, she had no problem leaving it out. Now, it was her lifeline. I tested it. As she sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling, I casually reached for my own phone and said, "Hey, can I check something on yours? Mine's acting up." It was a simple request. Nothing suspicious. Her reaction? Immediate. Subtle, but obvious to me. Her fingers tightened around the device for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "Oh, it's just dead, I think." She pressed the power button, theatrically, as if proving her point. "Yes, see? Need to charge it." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. She was lying. Her phone wasn't dead. I had heard it vibrate 2 minutes ago. Strike one. Later that day, I decided to test something else. Her location. She told me she had a late meeting, some after-hours work with a client. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But this time, I needed proof. So, while she was in the shower, I did something simple. I dropped an Apple AirTag into the lining of her car's trunk. Just a tiny tracker, unnoticed, untraceable. It wouldn't tell me much, but it would tell me if she was lying about where she was going. And of course, she was. At 7:45 p.m., she texted me. "Still at the office. This client is killing me. Should be home by 10. I smiled at my screen. Because my phone told me a different story. She wasn't at the office. She was across town. At a hotel. Strike two. The next day, I watched her more closely. Not obviously. Just enough to notice the changes she thought she was hiding. The way she checked her reflection twice before leaving for work. The extra perfume. The small, almost invisible smirk when a message popped up on her phone. That night, as we lay in bed, she turned away from me before falling asleep. I stared at the back of her head, listening to her breathing. Slow. Even. Completely at peace. She didn't know I knew. She didn't know the game had already started. And she had no idea that I never played to lose. There's a moment, just before the truth hits, where your brain fights to reject it. A split second where you tell yourself there must be another explanation. Because if this is real, then everything you believed in was a lie. But reality doesn't care about what you want to believe. It only deals in facts. And the fact was, I had proof. Cold, undeniable, inescapable proof. It happened on a Friday. She had told me she was going to dinner with some coworkers. Nothing unusual, nothing that would have raised suspicion if I hadn't already known better. I played along, kissed her on the cheek, told her to have fun. Then I watched as she left the house in that dress. The one she used to wear for our anniversaries, the one she once said made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the room. She wasn't wearing it for me. 15 minutes after she left, I checked my phone. The AirTag I had planted in her car blinked on the map. Not at the restaurant she mentioned. Instead, she was across town, parked behind a boutique hotel. That was all I needed. I grabbed my keys. The drive was quiet. No music. No distractions. Just the sound of my own breath, controlled and measured as I went over my plan. Because this wasn't about emotions. This was about execution. When I pulled into the lot, I didn't park near her. I found a space farther away, out of sight. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Words could be denied. Messages could be explained away. But actions? Actions were absolute. I waited. Watched. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. And then, I saw him. A man, tall, dark-haired, dressed too casually for a business dinner, walked up to her car. She got out, smiling, adjusting her dress, giving him the kind of look she used to give me. That quiet, secret I can't wait to be alone with you kind of look. She said something. He laughed. They kissed. And just like that, the last shred of doubt disappeared. It's strange, the way time slows down in moments like these. I should have felt something, rage, heartbreak, the crushing weight of betrayal. But all I felt was cold clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a choice. And now? It was my turn to make a choice. I watched as they walked inside together, completely unaware. I could have confronted her then. Could have stormed in, made a scene, demanded answers. But that would have been the reaction of a weak man. A man who still cared about what she had to say. I wasn't that man. I pulled out my phone. Snapped a few photos. Not for proof. I didn't need proof. For strategy. Then, I turned and walked back to my car, already thinking 10 steps ahead. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. And she had no idea what was coming next. Revenge, when done right, isn't about rage. It's about precision. About knowing exactly where to strike so that the damage isn't just immediate, it's permanent. The kind that lingers. The kind that makes a person wake up in a cold sweat years later, realizing they will never, ever recover from what they lost. I spent the night thinking. Not grieving, not drowning in self-pity, thinking. I played back every interaction, every conversation, every detail she thought I wasn't paying attention to. She had already chosen to betray me. Now, I was choosing how she would suffer for it. The first rule of a perfect revenge? Never let them see it coming. A messy confrontation, a dramatic fight, it would only make her feel justified. People like her love playing the victim. They rewrite the story in their favor. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. No, I was going to let her believe she had won, right up until the moment she lost everything. I made a list. Her weak spots. Her job? She was in a high-profile corporate role, a position that required trust, credibility, and a clean image. If certain details about her personal conduct were to reach the wrong people, well, let's just say corporate loyalty only goes so far. Her social circle? She loved to be admired, to be seen as the perfect wife, the perfect professional, the woman who had it all. Reputation was everything to her. A carefully curated illusion. And illusions? They shatter easily. Her finances? I had always been the provider. The steady foundation while she enjoyed the lifestyle I had built. The house? Mine. The savings? Mine. The future she thought she had? Mine. She depended on my stability, and I was about to pull it all away. Then, there was him. The man she risked everything for. The one she was sneaking around with like some love-struck teenager. What did he know about her? What had she told him? More importantly, how much did he think he meant to her? Because if there's one thing I've learned about affairs, it's this. They're never built on trust. Just mutual delusion. So, I started laying the groundwork. Step by step. First, I backed up every shred of evidence I had. Photos, texts, timestamps. Not for confrontation, but for leverage. Then, I made quiet moves behind the scenes. A casual conversation with an executive at her company, dropping just enough hints to plant doubt about her professionalism. A discreet meeting with our financial advisor to start shifting assets, legally, of course. And a little bit of carefully placed information to her closest friends, the kind that makes them question everything, but leaves them wondering if they should say something. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed to let her destroy herself. And the final piece? Him. The man she thought was her escape, her secret thrill. I needed him to see her exactly the way I now did. Not as some irresistible prize, but as a liability. And trust me, when a man realizes that the woman he's chasing comes with baggage, drama, and consequences, she stops being worth the trouble. It was all set. She was living in borrowed time. She just didn't know it yet. Revenge isn't about speed. It's about timing. The difference between an inconvenience and complete devastation is knowing exactly when to strike. Too early, and she has time to recover. Too late, and she might have already slipped away, rewriting the narrative in her favor. But catch her at the perfect moment? That's when the damage becomes irreversible. I had spent weeks preparing, moving pieces into place without her noticing. She still kissed me in the mornings, still smiled as she left for work. And I let her. Because the beauty of a well-set trap is that the prey never sees it coming. I chose the perfect setting, her company's annual gala. A high-profile event. Expensive, exclusive, and filled with the exact kind of people she desperately wanted to impress. Executives. Industry leaders. People who valued reputation above all else. It was the kind of night where careers were made or destroyed. She had been excited about it for weeks. Carefully choosing her dress, talking about who she needed to network with. She had no idea she was walking into her own execution. I played the part of the supportive husband flawlessly. Helped her zip up her dress. Complimented her. Held her hand in the car, all while knowing that by the end of the night, she would never look at me the same way again. We arrived at the venue, the kind of place where everything sparkled, chandeliers, champagne, conversations that dripped with artificial charm. She was in her element, floating from one conversation to the next, flashing that practiced smile of hers. And all the while, she had no idea that I had already detonated the bomb. At exactly 8:45 p.m., I excused myself to the restroom. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to be out of sight when it happened. I had sent an email earlier that evening, addressed to every major figure in her company. Executives, board members, clients. A well-documented expose attached, detailing her extracurricular activities. Not in my words, but in her own. Screenshots of messages. Timestamp locations. Proof. But the true masterpiece? The video. Earlier that week, I had set up a small, discreet recording device in her car. She had no idea it was there. It had captured everything, a full conversation between her and her affair partner. In it, she laughed about how easy it was to manipulate me. How she had been so careful not to get caught. How she was just waiting for the right moment to move on. And the cherry on top, how she had used company funds to cover some of their little getaways. Financial misconduct. A fireable offense. At 8:50 p.m., the first murmurs started. Small at first. Confused expressions. Glances in her direction. Someone checked their phone. Then another. And another. At 8:52 p.m., one of the senior executives approached her. Cold. Formal. A few quiet words exchanged. Her face changed. Confusion. Panic. Then the color drained completely. At 8:54 p.m., the whispers turned into full conversations. Everyone knew. I stepped back into the ballroom just in time to watch it unfold. She turned, searching for me. And when she saw me, that's when it hit her. The understanding. The realization that this wasn't an accident. That this wasn't just bad luck. This was me. I smiled. A small, polite smile. The kind a man gives when he's already won. And then, I turned and walked away. She wasn't my problem anymore. The moment it all collapsed around her was almost poetic. A perfectly orchestrated symphony of consequence, each note played at just the right time. Shock. Panic. Denial. Realization. I watched as they all flashed across her face, one after another, like the unraveling of a carefully woven lie. She was drowning, and there was no one left to throw her a lifeline. Her boss had pulled her aside, his expression stone cold, his voice sharp with restrained fury. She knew something was wrong before he even spoke. That's the thing about guilt. It makes you paranoid. Makes your mind race with every possible scenario, every secret that could have been exposed. And then, he showed her the email. The screenshots. The proof. I didn't have to hear the words to know what was being said. I saw the way her mouth opened slightly, forming the beginning of a protest before shutting again. The way her hand shook as she scrolled through the messages, her own words staring back at her like a ghost she couldn't escape. She looked up, searching the room, desperate for an anchor, for someone to step in and make this nightmare go away. Her colleagues were whispering now, their eyes darting toward her, some in disbelief, others in quiet satisfaction. People love a scandal, especially when the one falling is someone they once envied. Then, she found me. Her eyes locked onto mine from across the room, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. A long, frozen second where she knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some cruel coincidence. This was me. I could see it in her expression, that flicker of recognition. The realization that I had known all along. That every stolen kiss, every whispered conversation, every lie she thought she had gotten away with had been counted, cataloged, and weaponized. She started moving toward me, her heels clicking against the polished floor with a frantic urgency. Her hands trembled as she reached out, as if closing the space between us would somehow erase what had just happened. But nothing could undo this. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of murmured conversations around us. "We need to talk." I tilted my head slightly, letting her see the calm, calculated control on my face. She was unraveling, and I had never been more composed. "What is there to talk about?" I asked, my tone even, almost amused, like she was a stranger pitching me a deal I had no intention of accepting. She swallowed hard, glancing around, realizing that eyes were still on her, that every desperate move she made was being watched, judged. She hated this. The loss of control. The exposure. This isn't what you think," she started, her voice trembling, barely holding itself together. I gave her a slow, almost pitying smile. "No." I stepped in closer, just enough that only she could hear my next words. "Because it looks exactly like what it is. And the best part." I leaned in slightly, watching her flinch. "You did this to yourself." Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Not of me. Of the consequences. Because there was no fixing this. Her boss was still watching, waiting. This wasn't a discussion. This was a sentence being handed down. Her affair partner? Nowhere to be found. Of course, he wasn't. Men like him never stick around when the fun is over and the real cost of betrayal comes due. He had been the first to slip away when the scandal broke, leaving her standing alone in the wreckage. Her friends? Silent. Because in the world she had built, loyalty was a currency, and right now, she had nothing left to trade. And me? I was already gone. Not physically, not yet, but in every way that mattered. I had already stepped out of her life, closed the door, and locked it behind me. She reached for my hand, a desperate attempt to rebuild something that had already turned to dust. "Please," she whispered again. "You don't understand." I let the silence hang between us. Let her feel it. The weight of it. The emptiness. Then, I exhaled slowly, my voice calm. Final. "No, you don't understand." And then, I walked away. Because there was nothing left to say. Some people believe that once revenge is served, the story ends. That you walk away, let the dust settle, and never look back. But that's not how true consequences work. The real destruction doesn't happen in the moment, it happens in the aftermath. It's not the fall that ruins a person, it's what's left when they hit the ground. And my wife? She hit hard. The night of the gala was just the beginning. The first domino. Once it fell, the rest followed with brutal inevitability. She lost her job within 48 hours. Officially, it was a mutual separation to protect company interests. But the reality? She was fired. Not just for the affair, but for using company funds to cover some of their little business trips. The evidence I provided was thorough. Emails. Receipts. Just enough to ensure she wasn't just let go, she was blacklisted. No firm in the industry would touch her after that. Her career was over. But that was just her professional life. The social fallout was even worse. She had spent years crafting an image of perfection. The loving wife. The accomplished businesswoman. The woman others envied. And now? People talked. Friends whispered. The invitation stopped. The messages went unanswered. At first, she tried to fight it. Tried to play the victim. Told people I had twisted things, that it was just a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too damning. Her own words, her own actions, laid out in black and white for everyone to see. No one believed her. And the man she had risked everything for? The one she thought was her escape, her new beginning? He was gone. He hadn't reached out. Hadn't defended her. Hadn't even responded to her messages. The moment things got messy, he abandoned her like old furniture on the side of the road. Because that's what she was now, damaged goods. She tried reaching out to me, of course. Desperation always makes people forget their pride. The first message came 2 days after the gala. "We need to talk. Please." I ignored it. The second came a week later. "I made a mistake. I should have told you the truth. I was scared." Scared? No. She wasn't scared when she was sneaking off to hotels. She wasn't scared when she laughed about deceiving me. She was scared now because she had nothing left. I ignored that one too. Then, the final message. The last pathetic attempt to claw back into my life. "Please. I love you. Can we just talk?" Love? She didn't love me. She loved stability. She loved the comfort I had built for her. She loved what I provided. And now that it was gone? Now, she wanted me back. I deleted the message without responding. Because I was already gone. I moved on quickly. Not because I was trying to prove something, but because I had already won. I had already grieved the loss of my marriage before she even knew it was over. By the time she felt the impact of her choices, I had already rebuilt my life. New apartment. New opportunities. New woman. Yes, I met someone. Someone better. Someone who didn't need deception to feel alive. Someone who actually valued loyalty. And my ex-wife? She was exactly where she deserved to be, alone. Some people say revenge isn't worth it. That it doesn't change what happened, that it doesn't bring back what was lost. Maybe they're right. Maybe justice is just an illusion we chase to make sense of betrayal. But I don't believe that. I believe in consequences. In cause and effect. In making sure that when someone shatters something that was once whole, they feel every single broken piece cutting back into them. She felt it. I made sure of that. It's been months now. Enough time for the dust to settle, for life to move forward. For me, anyway. She's still trapped in the wreckage. No job. No reputation. No social safety net. She's renting a small apartment now, far from the life of luxury she once took for granted. No designer clothes. No fancy dinners. No admirers. Just silence. A fitting in for someone who thrived on attention. I don't check in on her. I don't care where she is, what she's doing. She's a ghost to me now. The past. A mistake I learned from. And I have no intention of repeating that mistake ever again. The irony? She still doesn't understand where she went wrong. She still thinks she lost everything because she got caught. Not because she betrayed the one person who would have done anything for her. Not because she threw away a life people would kill for, just for the temporary thrill of sneaking around. But maybe that's the ultimate justice. Not that I destroyed her, but that she destroyed herself. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away quietly? Or would you have made sure she felt every ounce of the betrayal she dealt? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because I have a feeling this isn't the last time a story like this needs to be told.